So yes, I'm John Ahlquist, and I'm in global policy and strategy. Some of you might remember that as IRPS, or International Relations and Pacific Studies. There's a few of you here, great. We have a new name, and I'm a new faculty member brought in because of the new name. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about two things, tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk to you about a project that's done and completed, and then I'm going to talk to you about one I'm in the middle of right now that is not completed, so I cannot tell you the answer yet. But hopefully it'll give you enough of a flavor for what I'm doing and what's happening inside GPS and UC San Diego more broadly so that you can come and ask me the questions that you want to hear answers to. So I'm a political economist. I work right at the boundary of markets and government. I want to try to figure out how is it that capitalist markets, free markets, can actually play together nicely with democratic governments. Like when does that work well? And then what are the situations and times where that really breaks down, and can we do better about fixing it? And the thing that I've gotten really excited about across a whole bunch of different projects that may or may not necessarily line up when you look at them at first glance is really trying to understand how the spillovers happen. So if you're taking an action in your firm, in your labor union, in your government that has effects or consequences for other people who aren't inside the organization or inside the nation or inside the region where you're making that discussion or making that decision, but it's affecting them anyways, how does that play out? How can you actually get people to think a little bit more broadly and incorporate the interests of other people when they're making their own decisions initially? And what happens when that doesn't happen? What are the consequences that might be negative that we can learn from and hopefully avert or adjust policy or build new institutions to help us do things better? So this will have everything to do with discussions about distributional outcomes from market economies, and it has obvious implications for anything environmental that crosses borders or crosses political boundaries. So this is the example, this is the book that came out a couple years ago. I worked very closely with a co-author on this, and in this book, our big puzzle was how is it that some organizations manage to develop the ability to get members to think more broadly, to take action on behalf of people who aren't necessarily in the organization itself. And moreover, does that actually have any effect on those people in particular? And so the organizations we were looking at in this book were labor unions in the United States and also in Australia. And so we had a whole bunch of different kinds of data. We had interview data, we had deep archival stuff. We were going through dusty books and archives. We were doing surveys of union members and union leaders. And so the two of the unions we looked at, not just two, but two of the key ones, are illustrated by the leaders of those unions in the kind of middle 20th century that are on this slide behind me. So on my right here, this is Harry Bridges, who you may or may not have heard of. He was the major founding leader of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. This is the dock workers union on the west coast of the United States. And on the other side, this is David Beck, who was the pivotal and really important leader of the Teamsters in the United States in the post-war period. We all know Jimmy Hoffa. He was important as well, but this was like Jimmy Hoffa's mentor, basically, for better or for worse. And so these two unions illustrate two very different paradigms of how organizations that can advocate for their members, that can both do well for their members. Both of these unions were successful in really improving the working conditions, the wages, and the benefits that their members got. But where they diverged was that the union on the left, the Longshore Union, became a much broader, more politically mobilized union across a whole variety of topics that you may or may not agree with or you may or may not care about. So things like the anti-apartheid movement, the war in Vietnam, the WTO ministerial in Seattle in 1999, a whole variety of things over generations they mobilized their members around that didn't really have anything to do with why these members were actually in a union. Right? Whereas the Teamsters took a very different tack. They will not touch politics or any political cause unless it is directly relevant to the wage interests of their members. And so our question was, why did this happen and what effect did it have on the members? So the short answer to this is a lot of it had to do actually with these guys. The people who founded the union had very particular reasons for wanting to take on that responsibility. Dave Beck was very interested in his own personal economic well-being. He did very well as the leader of the union, but the union also did well along with him. Harry Bridges was a very committed, ideological, political animal, and he wanted the union to become involved in politics. But in order for the members to go along with him, he had to develop a set of rules and principles inside the union that actually bound his hands and constrained his behavior. And in so doing, he was able to provoke people to take action around things they may not have thought were relevant. And so one of the really surprising things we learned in this book was that the act of being part of this organization, of seeing your fellow workmates, these are guys working on the dock, these are not necessarily well-educated individuals who thought about politics or thought about political causes or even thought to get involved, suddenly they were being asked to get involved. And once they had that experience of involvement, we had everything from survey data to people following us out of meetings who had been part of the strikes of the 1940s, wanting to tell us their stories about, look, I didn't know that I cared until somebody asked me to get involved. And now that I know, and now that I've seen it, now I'm involved and now I care. So this organization, at least at a particular time, had the ability to actually transform the political preferences and behavior of some of its members. And we found that to be pretty remarkable, and it's not how standard models, either in political science and politics or in economics, really think about how people develop their political behavior and their political preferences. And you can imagine how this could be quite consequential more broadly. So that's the one that's done. All right. So here's the one that is very different and that I'm in the middle of right now. And the question we're trying to figure out here is, did the Swiss central bank throw the Polish elections last year? All right. So quite different, but again, this is the notion of spillovers and who has a say in the decisions that affect other people. So Switzerland, small country, middle of Europe, wealthy, trades a lot. Their central bank has pegged its currency to the euro for some time to maintain the competitiveness of their exports. And in January of 2015, the central bank, to the surprise of many, many people who had a lot of money on the line, suddenly decided to stop doing that. And its currency jumped tremendously against the euro, the dollar, and a whole bunch of other currencies. One of those was the Polish currency, the zloty. And so this graph right here is just this is the exchange rate of these two currencies. This is the euro right here, and this is the Polish zloty on the other side. You can see that's the day where they made their decision. It's not, you know, it's not a mystery. And so why would this matter? What's the big deal here? What would be going on? Well, it turns out in several Central European countries, particularly Poland, they had decided to allow foreign banks to come in and make loans to their citizens for things like mortgages, primarily mortgages, in fact, that were denominated in foreign currencies. So if you're a Polish citizen, you could go to your bank and you could take out a mortgage in Swiss francs, right? And the interest rates were low and things were cool and you thought that was a great idea. So a lot of people did. And Poland was the one actually, next to Hungary, which if you want to know more about Hungary, I'll tell you about later, was the one that had this, is the biggest factor going on inside of Poland. And so all of a sudden, the Swiss central bank, which is independent inside of Switzerland, is not paying attention, or at least not internalizing the effects on Polish households, Polish voting, and the fact that there's a Polish election coming in October of last year, makes this decision. Right? People's mortgages, or at least a large subset of people, their mortgages jumped 30% overnight. Right? And they took on this risk. They were supposed to know, but this is what actually happened. And so what do you see? So this is what you get. You get homeowners in the streets in Krakow, in Warsaw, demanding something different happen. And you'll notice this is the AP Newswire, but it even got picked up in the San Diego Union Tribune, right? So even in San Diego, they heard about the Polish homeowners and how upset they were. So this became a big deal all through the summer. It was core to the election campaign that went through the summer. The incumbent party kind of had this relatively moderate platform, like we'll help the homeowners, we'll make the banks take part of it, whatever. The far right party, however, came along and said, no, forget the banks. We're gonna make them bear all the costs. We're gonna take care of you, homeowners who took out these mortgages. And so here's what happened. You had the far right Law and Justice Party defeated the incumbent and won the election in 2015. And now this incumbent, or this new government, has been doing a variety of things where it's not clear that this government is really all that committed to the ongoing functioning of democracy. And this is inside the European Union. So the European Union, other governments in Europe, even the United States State Department has started making some noises about what is going on with this new government in Poland. It's not clear. So this is the state of affairs right now. And so what I'm doing, along with some colleagues in Switzerland, in San Diego and elsewhere, is we've gotten the data on a whole variety of surveys right around the time of the devaluation or the revaluation of the Swiss franc. And then we ran a whole separate set of surveys right around the Polish election. And what we're trying to determine is how many votes did this move? Was this enough to swing the election? And whose votes were the ones that actually moved? So if you'll come back next year, or even in 6 months, I'll be able to tell you the answer to that question. But that's what we're in the middle of figuring out right now. And this is one of these examples of governments, their actions spilling over on the lives and well-being of other people who weren't part of that initial decision. And what can we do to make that better so we don't necessarily have these kinds of outcomes in the future? So I'll stop.